So, a huge legal victory, and I hope a huge PR victory if the media will report it, but a huge legal victory for the German band Rammstein. As you know, this band and its frontman Till Lindemann have been utterly besieged for the last month or so with lies and media attacks and all kinds of defamation, basically. And as you know, the probably know, the biggest story that has come out of all of this was the cover story in Der Spiegel magazine that came out several weeks ago. It was a huge story. It was a huge hit job, I think, on the band and on Lindemann. But it was a huge story. It was the cover story of Der Spiegel, arguably the most respected and biggest and best known news outlets in Germany, and one of the biggest in the world. But there was this huge cover story that they did entitled The Fall of Rammstein, and it was very, very dramatic and had all kinds of accusations and claims that apparently were not true. And so, what happened yesterday, there was a press release toward the end of the day that was issued explaining this court judgment. And so, this court in Germany has reprimanded Der Spiegel for its inaccurate reporting in this big cover story that they did, and has banned them from further reporting this story. Now, the press release didn't go into a lot of detail, and so I am not sure about the extent of this ban. I don't know if the ban applies just to this particular instance of false reporting in this huge cover story, or if Der Spiegel is banned from any further reporting on the Rammstein controversy, period. But either way, whatever the situation is, and I guess that'll become clearer, but whatever the situation is, it is huge. Because how often in these types of cases with these, Me Too type allegations, how often do you have a court actually handing down a verdict and saying, no, you got this story wrong. No, this is not true. And you cannot report this anymore. It is huge. It is huge. And I don't know, it has something to do also, I think, with it being easier to go to court in Germany with these claims and have them adjudicated. As a lot of you know, in the United States, we have more of a traditional respect, or I shouldn't say respect, appreciation for the freedom of the press. And like everything, it has pros and cons. And so what we're seeing right now in our country with a lot of this terrible media coverage of different cases and the reporting of lies and rumors that goes unchecked, what we're seeing here is that the downside of having perhaps unlimited respect for the freedom of the press, right? So every system has its upsides and downsides, and I'm not going to get into a debate about that, but I'm very glad that Rammstein received this very clear judgment from a court, and that Der Spiegel has been publicly reprimanded and banned from further reporting this. Now, the press release did not go into a lot of detail about which aspects of the story were proved false in court. It did mention one example, which was the allegation in Der Spiegel made by Sophie W., one of their main sources, who apparently was full of a lot of BS. But Sophie W. claimed that Richard and Till had gotten into a fight, a shouting match over a groupie one night. And so it turns out that this was BS. And this is just one of a number of things in the story that were BS. Now, I have not reported on something up until now because I did not have actual evidence or verification to present to you. And I didn't have the name of someone who would go on record. And I still don't. But because of this court ruling now, and in particular, the fact that one of the things this court has adjudicated is that Sophie W.'s story was inaccurate, I think I can tell you now that I have been told from research that I have done and what I have heard from various people involved in this, that the Sophie W. story in Der Spiegel was a complete misrepresentation of a lot of things, and that Sophie W. actually is not who she is presented as being in this Der Spiegel article. And I think this was one of the things that the band was and their lawyers were able to present in court was the fact that a large part of some of the worst allegations in the Der Spiegel article came from this apparently discredited Sophie W. source. Who apparently is someone who did not have the kind of access to the band or knowledge that she claims, and also is disgruntled with people associated with the band, and seems to be, frankly, just an attention seeker of sorts, and someone who also has a desire for some kind of vengeance. Now, I don't have anyone to go on the record. These are things that, from my research and talking to various people, that I've found, but I don't have anyone who's willing to go on the record and say this. But the fact that now the German court has ruled against Der Spiegel, and in particular, one of the things that have been cited is one of the stories that Sophie W. told in the Der Spiegel article. The fact that this has now been adjudicated by a court, I feel comfortable now in telling you that I have heard that that's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of all of the inaccuracies and problems with Sophie W.'s story in Der Spiegel, not to mention the rest of it. Look, let me give you another example, and this is something that I've talked about a little bit online. What I like to do when I'm looking at a news story and I'm trying to determine if it's valid or not, what I like to do is look for places in the story where I have what I believe is excellent, absolute knowledge of the truth. And I look for places in the story where that knowledge that I have can be either corroborated and confirmed, and like, okay, well, they're on the same page, so maybe they're right, or where it can be contradicted. What I'm saying is, if there are things in a story that I know absolutely from my own knowledge and research are untrue, then that's an indication to me that the larger story has a lot of issues, right? And so this is my point. As a number of you know, I have been researching and covering the Marilyn Manson hoax here in the United States. And I don't want to get into all of that right now, but you can look at my channel and see those videos that I've done on that. I've done like 120 videos on it now. Well, in the course of doing this research and learning about this, I've learned a lot about Marilyn Manson, Brian Warner. I've learned a lot about the people that he's known, associated with, and people in his circle, and I feel like I have a really good grasp of that guy's history and that guy Manson's history and what his situation has been over the years. And so here's my point. There was one paragraph in the Der Spiegel article that talked about Manson. And so you could say that out of all of out of everything in the article, there was one particular paragraph where I feel like I'm an expert because I've talked to a lot of people close to Manson. I've known a lot of people. I've researched it. I know this stuff. And just in that one paragraph about Manson, it was nothing but lies and mistruths and inaccuracies. And I don't know if Der Spiegel is doing it deliberately. I think these days the media, they are deliberate about their lies, or if they're just incompetent. But either way, the section on Manson, it was completely messed up. It was complete BS. And I don't want to and I don't want to go into the details on it. Maybe I'll talk about it later, but I'm saying that it was very clear to me just looking at that. Well, gosh, if they got all of this wrong, this is the one section that I have, like, I think very absolute knowledge on, and they got all of this messed up. Well, then of course they probably messed up the rest of the article too. And I'll tell you something else. One of the claims that Der Spiegel made in that article about Marilyn Manson, is that he had won a lawsuit against one of his accusers. That is, unfortunately, I wish that he had, but unfortunately, that is absolutely untrue. Manson has not won any court judgments or any trials against any of his accusers or anyone related to his situation. He just hasn't. And so I don't know what they're talking about. Yes, there are claims that are going to be adjudicated in court, and there are court hearings and trials coming up. And yes, he has a defamation lawsuit against his primary accusers, but that's not been adjudicated yet. So he has won nothing. So here's my point. If there is an inaccuracy that obvious in this Der Spiegel article, it's so obvious that it can be disproved with a simple Google search, with a simple internet check and some basic research. If they're getting that so wrong, they're getting probably they're getting everything wrong, or a lot wrong. And I can tell you that the more that I have learned about this Rammstein situation and the more that I've learned against the allegations against them, the more that I see that is a lot of BS as well. And that this story, this scandal now that has been generated by the media and by some German politicians and frankly some crazy and manipulative fans, quote unquote fans like Shelby, and some very opportunistic internet personalities like Kayla Shix, I'm seeing the more that I look into it that it's just a complete fabrication and hoax and hysteric sort of moral sexual panic that's going on. So this is a huge victory for Rammstein, and I just want to celebrate it because I know it's probably not going to get a lot of play in the mainstream media because the last thing that they want to do is admit what a house of cards their whole paradigm has become. But it is really great news. And how often do you have a situation where a court actually intervenes and adjudicates these types of matters? Because again, we don't have it in the United States. It is very, very difficult to get something like this done. As you know, it's very, very difficult to successfully sue anyone for defamation or libel or anything in this country. And so the fact that they have gotten this clear ruling, it is such a repudiation, a legal and public repudiation by the courts of Der Spiegel's reporting. And look, this wasn't, let's just remember, this article by Der Spiegel, this was not, some little tiny article that they put in, tucked into their magazine, no big deal. Like, well, okay, I guess they screwed it up, but it's not a big deal, right? Just a little article. No, this was a giant cover story, hit job, takedown piece to try to bring down Rammstein. And the German media and the international media have been doing everything they can to try to cancel these guys. But that story, out of all of the media reports that have come out about this Rammstein situation, that story was absolutely the most prominent, the most important. It was a huge cover story, and it got a lot of play, and it introduced a number of new accusations. Let's not forget this Sophie W. person who's now been publicly discredited by a court in Germany. This Sophie W. was Der Spiegel's inside source who in this article was explaining the ins and outs of this system whereby Till Lindemann could have sexual hookups at his concerts or after his concerts, right? She was the inside source. She said that she had access to all of the areas at the concert, access that even some of the roadies wouldn't have, or that people she knew all this stuff. So this is just a huge, huge victory. And I think we should savor it. We should enjoy it. We should promote it because it is very rare in our modern world and in these situations, as you know. We even saw it with the Johnny Depp case, unfortunately, and with the UK libel suit. It is very, very rare to get this kind of public legal condemnation of a mainstream media source. And this should just tell us, look, everybody, this was their huge cover story in Der Spiegel. Arguably, it was going to be one of the most prominent stories that they would come out with all year. It probably will end up, that issue would probably have ended up being their best-selling issue, actually. I don't know if they'll have to shelve it now because of this ban by the German courts. I did look up the article, the Fall of Rammstein. I did look it up to see if it was still up, and it is not up anymore. You can find it if you do like an archive or you look on Reddit or something. But Der Spiegel has removed that article, and I bet they're going to be removing a number of articles about Rammstein, and I bet we're not going to see any more Rammstein coverage from them. So if they screw that up this badly, everybody, I mean, look, this is what I've been trying to say about the media, and this is what others have been trying to say. This was a huge cover story. This was kind of a signature German story. This is something they should have been taking very seriously and being very, very careful with. And if they screwed it up this badly, imagine how bad the rest of the coverage is of this story. Imagine how much everyone else is screwing it up, and they are. So I'm going to continue reporting on this. I'm one of the few voices, as you know, who is trying to get the real story out there, and there aren't many of us. And so I appreciate your support. All of my links are below, as always, and check out my other videos. I'm going to keep this coverage coming. And as always, I'll be looking at other cases as well, where I believe people have been falsely accused. All right. Congratulations to Rammstein. Der Spiegel, you really suck. Now everybody knows it.